We do a lot of freeze drying on this channel, and the main reason we got our freeze dryer in the first place was for our garden. We have a pretty decent sized garden and we grow as much food as we possibly can in here. And I've had a lot of questions around how I have my garden set up, and some people kind of wanted to see what this garden was like. I'm not going to get too in depth on how to grow some of the things that we're growing. If you're interested in gardening videos and kind of the more how-to side of things with what I'm doing in here, then let me know in the comments. If this video performs relatively well on my channel, then maybe I'll start making some of those. I'm going to go ahead and start on that side of the garden because the sun's coming up and it's going to hit that side first. So I don't want to be in the sun all day. So let's start there. Back here we have our broccoli, and right now with it being 100 degrees in Utah, the broccoli we have isn't doing very well. It's definitely hitting that very last part of its life cycle. Some of them are starting to bolt, like this one took off on me. A couple of these others, they're just not doing very well. We were able to get a lot of harvest, but the problem we had here in Utah is it got really hot really fast and made a lot of this cold weather stuff really struggle. But what we have been able to do, come here, I'll show you. With broccoli, you can get a harvest in like we did on this one. We've already harvested this one, and then it grows back little small heads of broccoli around the main one that you had growing. So that's pretty cool. This one hasn't bolted yet. We're going to be able to harvest this here pretty soon and get just a little bit of broccoli out of it. We do have some that are still doing relatively well, and that's why we haven't pulled these out yet, is because some of these are still trying to produce even in the heat, which is awesome. Here's another one that we already harvested, and it's starting to put out little broccoli heads, little mini heads. So that's really awesome. Over here we have our cabbages, and we have an entire bed of cabbage. And I'll be totally honest, I didn't mean to grow as much cabbage as we did. Last year we tried to go cabbage and it worked relatively well, but we lost a lot of plants. And so this year I grew a lot of cabbage with the expectation of me losing a lot. But what ended up happening is I ended up just having an insane amount of cabbage. So a lot of this is going to get freeze dried and saved for soups and saved for coleslaw, different things like that. So we've got a lot of really nice cabbage heads here. We took one in, I think yesterday or the day before, and it is currently in the freeze dryer right now. And over here we have our cauliflower. This is an entire bed of cauliflower. We have one really massive plant over here. I'm not sure exactly what it's doing, but I'm waiting for it to give me a head, because this thing is just, it's massive. This is a 4 foot by 8 foot bed, and that plant right there is just out of control. The rest of these, they are just now starting to put on heads. If you look down in here, there's a little head of cauliflower in there. These are starting to be productive, but they're just taking so long. And we are starting to get an aphid issue over here. Aphids are just something that we deal with every single year, and it's just kind of something that we've learned to deal with and live with and try to mitigate as it pops up. This bed right here is a pretty young bed. We've got 4 Brussels sprouts right here. Brussels sprouts are something we have always struggled with because aphids come in and just kill them off. We have never once successfully grown Brussels sprouts, and it's something that I love. My wife makes them with bacon and brown sugar. They're not healthy at all the way my wife makes them, but they are so good. Here we have okra, and okra is something I've never really grown. We tried last year, but we kind of tried too late. So we planted these ones from seed, and they're coming along nicely. Over here we did have cucamelon that was going to grow up this arch trellis, but the cucamelon didn't like being transplanted at all. We transplanted it into these little spots here, and it just kind of died off. So now we have seeds that are planted in there, and we are just waiting for them to come up. Over here we have our sweet potatoes, and this is an entire bed of sweet potatoes. They're starting to grow on that side and just kind of working their way over here, even though we have some plants right in here. So tons of sweet potatoes in this bed. That's pretty much what this entire bed is going to be. We're going to make a lot of little sweet potato chips and different things like that for the freeze dryer. This is a butternut squash, and this we have growing up one of our arch trellises. And with these, you can grow pretty much any type of vining plant on an arch trellis, or any kind of trellis really. But the thing you're gonna have to look for is as they grow, you have to help them up the trellis. So for this, as it grows, I'm going to put it up the trellis and just kind of make sure it follows its way all the way up. I don't know what's going on, but we have this plant. We aren't seeing any pest issues, but this one is just, it's on its last leg. So this might just end up being one plant on this trellis here. And then my wife really wanted to grow some loofah. So we have loofah growing right here, and hopefully this is going to grow up and over this big trellis. And this is another one that it does kind of grab on a little bit better, I've noticed. So we don't have to train train it quite as much, but we still do have to kind of train this up the trellis here. And behind that, we have our onions, and we planted these onions when there was still snow out on the ground. We planted them from seed this winter. I think it was January, February, I can't remember right. This is the first year we've actually been able to really successfully grow onions. And if you look down here, we've got nice big onion bulbs that are forming down here, which is something that is new for us. And we tried a new method of growing these. Instead of growing them from a bulb from the store or planting a seed directly into the ground, we actually did a completely different method that worked out really well for us. Over here, we've already started to harvest some of our bunching onions over here. So we have, I think these are Ishikura. Yeah, so Ishikura bunching onion, and these grew really well for us. They are pretty amazing. We can pull them out. They've got little bulbs on the bottom of them. We chop them up and we freeze dry them and turn them into onion powder, which we've already done one video on. And we're doing another video right now where we're just slicing these up and saving them for soups, stews, and different cooking like that, because all you have to do to rehydrate these after you freeze dry them is throw them in some water. And if you're making a soup or stew with the freeze-dried onions, you can just take your onion and throw it directly into the soup or stew, and it's going to rehydrate itself. These are definitely good ones to have in your garden if you've got a freeze dryer. This is one that I'm very excited about, these two plants here, because these, oh look, there's a little bee coming to hang out. Hey little buddy, I'm not trying to just, oh no, I'm sorry. But these are my buttercup squashes, and I had this squash last year and it took off and went all the way up and came around to about there on this trellis. But what I struggled with is squash bugs. Squash bugs absolutely love my garden and try to take it over every single year. But this is a squash that I'm extremely excited about. It's growing very quickly, and this is one that you definitely have to kind of help up the trellis as it comes up. There's another bee, but I'm not gonna scare that one off. It's okay, little buddy. Just keep doing what you're doing. But my wife loves tomatoes, and we have a lot of plans for different tomato powders and different freeze-dried tomatoes that we want to do this year. So I'm gonna quickly go through what we've got here. We've got apricot zebra, we've got big rainbow, 2 big beefs right here. We've got a couple of watermelon beefsteaks and some normal beefsteaks right here. So a full bed. This bed is going to be absolutely insane here in the next couple of months. And then over here, we have more tomatoes. We have 4 entire beds of tomatoes. So we got pineapple tomatoes, we've got Cherokee purples, we've got Isis candy cherry, sunrise bumblebee. This is going to be a really awesome bed once it gets going. I'm really excited for these because these are little awesome kind of orangish, reddish cherry tomatoes, and I'm going to cut them in half and freeze dry them to make little tomato snacks, and I'm really excited about that one. I've got a crane. Is this a melon or a squash? Honestly, I don't remember at this point. I'll have to figure that out, but I have so many plants growing in here that I forget. This is another one you kind of have to help it up the trellis, but it's growing really, really well. And while we're talking about trellises, let me explain to you how I have this garden set up and why I have it set up this specific way, because I've done some pretty cool stuff in this garden to grow as much food as I possibly can. Here comes the sun. Doo, 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 doo. Let me see if I can fix this. You can kind of see it. I have 16 of these raised beds back here, and I have them running east to west, and I did that on purpose. I want them running with the sun, and the reason I did that is because of these arch trellises right here. I want my trellises to go north to south, so that way as the sun comes up, so right now the sun is coming up right behind the camera, right into my face. The sun is coming up that way, and it's going to follow these arch trellises all day long, and it actually ends up just a little bit off to the north, but by the end of the season it kind of finds its way back this way. So when these plants are all completely grown and they're taking over these trellises, the sun almost lines up perfectly with the end of my garden. So what that does is when these plants get big, and all these big vining trellising plants that I have, these trellises aren't going to be shading out everything that is on the other side, or everything that is in these raised beds on the outsides of the trellises. A lot of people get themselves into trouble when they're doing arch trellises, because if you do them in the wrong direction, they're gonna create a huge shadow onto other stuff that you're growing. So that's definitely something to think about if you're looking into doing a type of garden like this. The raised beds that I have, they are Vego Garden raised beds, and I swear by these raised beds. The cost up front is more than you're gonna use for, let's say, a wooden raised bed, but these beds are gonna be right here for the next 20 plus years, and I won't have to rebuild them, tear them down, anything like that. They're gonna be here in this garden. I made sure I made everything that is going to last a very very long time. So my arch trellises, made out of metal, made out of really strong T-posts. My raised beds, they're metal, but they don't transfer a lot of heat into the growing area, like the inside of the bed, which is something I was a little bit worried about initially, but not anymore after using them last year, because last year was the first year that we actually used this garden the way that it's set up right now. If you're interested in raised beds like this, seriously, I can't recommend these guys enough. So Vego Garden, I'm gonna leave a link down in the description below, so go check them out. They've got some pretty wild stuff when it comes to raised beds and just gardening in general. Here is another bed of tomatoes. We've got a couple Celebrities, a Delicious over there. We have a couple German Giants right here and another Delicious right here. So here we have Roma tomatoes, and we planted 2 of them per cage. And these cages are made out of cattle panel. They're extremely heavy duty. They're not going to topple over or anything. So we planted 2 of them per cage, and we've done this a little bit before, not quite on to this scale. So we're going to see how this does this year. Roma tomatoes are good for making powders. They're good for making sauces. We love Roma tomatoes. We did an entire bed of those. This right here is a personal melon that I am so excited about growing this season. It's called a vine peach, and it makes this little personal size melon that you can eat, and they're supposed to be really good. I've never actually grown them before, but this is one I've heard a lot about, and I'm really excited to grow. And this one has kind of been bushing out. It's coming a lot out the front, but that's okay, because I'm gonna let a lot of this stuff kind of grow out into the walkways, because realistically I don't need a wheelbarrow or anything in here anymore this season, so I can let some of this stuff grow out into the walkways just a little bit, so I can still walk through here, but I can also grow food in here. That's kind of what I want to do, is grow as much food as possible, and that's kind of the whole point of the arch trellises and growing the way that I am. And I'm also utilizing some walking space over on the other side of the garden, and I'll show you that here in a minute. This is another melon. This is just kind of a smaller to medium sized melon, and this one's also doing really well. We do have to train this one up here or there. We've got a little one hanging out here, but there's a bee on that one, so I'm not gonna disturb that. It's morning out here, and in the morning we get a lot of bees coming through. Over here we have a Kajari melon, and these are little kind of tiger striped personal melons. We grew something similar last year, which we are this year, which is the tiger melon, which is over here. So these are very similar, and we wanted to grow them next to each other so we can kind of compare, because next year I'm only going to grow one of them. So I wanted to kind of compare this year which one I like more. I love the tiger melon. It was one of my favorite things I grew last year. The smell they put off in the garden is just amazing. It is a very strong, very sweet smell that just fills up the entire garden. It's an amazing, amazing melon. But I've heard this one is just as good, so I want to try it out. This is another one where we've got to come through and start bringing these up the trellis. Down here, I'll let this one kind of grow out. Same with over here. I'll kind of let them flow into the walkways a little bit. But stuff like this, where they're hanging down too much, I am going to bring this up like this and just kind of put it back and forth, weave it through as it grows. So a lot of times you can get a leaf through one of the holes, and that leaf will kind of hold it where you need it to be. So just like that, that's all we need to do to trellis these. Now we're getting into my thing, and this is what got me into gardening in the first place, and that is peppers. So we have a King Star Lemon Starburst right here. We have a Peach Star Kissed right here. These are 2 of my absolute favorite peppers. Very hot, upper 300,000-ish Scoville heat units. Hot pepper, but extremely good. These are Pimento de Padrones. This is my favorite pepper to use for everyday cooking or preserving from the garden. These are about the same heat as a jalapeno, maybe a little bit less, but sometimes you get a sneaker that just kind of creeps up on you. When people talk about hatch chilies and roasting hatch chilies, I would much rather roast these. We still have a bunch of these in our freezer from last year that were roasted. This is just an amazing pepper that is extremely productive. So if you've never grown a Pimento de Padrone, you need to try this. Here's a Piri Piri, and these ones just grow very small little red peppers that just point straight up to the sky. This is one I use a lot in sauces because it's a nice, really hot little pepper for what it is. I love this pepper. We use green ones to make it's called a fresh sauce. It's like a cilantro, it's like a hot cilantro ginger sauce, and it's amazing. Over here we have a Bahamian goat, and this is one that is just a really good sauce pepper. I love this pepper for making sauces. It's an orange pepper up in the habanero range heat level, but it is much more flavorful than a habanero is. Here's a 7-pot brain strain, and if you know anything about me, if you've watched me on social media for any amount of time, you know that I love my hot peppers, and that's what this is a very hot, very productive pepper that I really love, and we'll be making some powders out of those. Here we have some more super hots. We have a red monster, a Butjalokia, which is just a ghost pepper. We have a Reaper purple peach, which is pretty crazy because you've got these green leaves down on the bottom, and then as it grows, look at those really just beautiful purplish, really dark foliage that's coming up out of there. We have a chocolate Primatelli, which in my opinion, this is the hottest pepper I've ever grown in my life, and in my opinion, it's hotter than a Carolina Reaper. I've eaten both, just the straight pepper, and that is much hotter than a Carolina Reaper, and I'll argue that all day long. This is a Death Spiral, and it's just one that I grew my very first year growing peppers, so that's one that I really love to grow. Chocolate Brain Strain, this is one that I love for powders and sauces. It's just a really hot, really productive pepper. We have a Peach Reaper over here, and a Purple Death. Ooh, look at this. Okay, here we go. I did not know I had peppers. If you've never seen a super hot pepper, this is what they're gonna be looking like. You've got just this wrinkly, awesome looking pepper. Oftentimes they've got a really scary looking tail on there. This pepper is terrifying. Eating this plain is pretty scary, but you can use it a lot for sauces and powders. I'm really excited to freeze dry a lot of pepper powder this season because I have this little thing on my keychain to put spicy powder in, and I put it on everything. So I didn't realize I had some peppers growing, so I'm gonna have to go look at that later, but I'm really excited about this. Over here we have an entire bed of beans, different types of beans. We've got garbanzo beans over here. We have some Monte Gusto pole beans that are gonna be climbing up this trellis here. They're already starting to climb up that, which makes me happy. Beans are another one that we've struggled with, but we've never direct sowed them, and we did this year, and that was the big difference that we needed, was sowing them directly instead of starting them and putting them into the garden. So we have all kinds of beans back here, rattlesnake beans and different types. So we'll be showing you these as we get them, because we're gonna be freeze drying a ton of these because we're about to be completely overloaded with beans. These are doing really well. This is a nice one that I wasn't expecting to produce this early, but this is a lemon drop melon, and we've got one here, and we've got one right here. They're starting to grow for us. And then over here we have a sugar baby watermelon, which is another one I'm excited about. And really, you can grow any size of melons or squashes that you want on these trellises. The key though is once they start growing and they start getting too big, you do need to support them. So there's different ways you can support them. If you're interested in knowing more about that, then I can possibly do a video on that later, but I can grow some pretty big things on these trellises as long as I support them well enough. And over here, we're getting into our squash plants, which is one I'm really excited about, because with the freeze dryer, we can make either squash soup or squash powder to turn into soup. We're going to be experimenting with the best ways to be doing that. We've got a butterbush, which we've got some squash growing right there. We've got a pineapple squash, which this is one I've never grown. We've got that flower nice and open down out here in the morning. And we've got a Warsaw pasta, which is kind of like a spaghetti squash style squash, and we have one right down there. And if you want a spaghetti squash, but you don't have an area to either trellis it or just let it sprawl out over the ground, because it's normally a vining plant, this Warsaw pasta, it is a bushing style plant, so that will kind of help you there if you're interested. And then we just kind of paired them up, so those two are the same, those two are the same, and those two are the same, all kind of right next to each other. This is where we had our peas, and we were growing a ton of peas. You might have seen those in previous videos we made, because we freeze dried a bunch of them. We had a ton of peas growing in here, but now we have pumpkins. We planted pumpkin seeds. We've got some small pumpkins that are going to be trellising right here, and then we have larger pumpkins that are going to be growing out here for jack-o'-lanterns for the kids. So hopefully those produce pretty well. We've wanted to grow pumpkins for a long time, but we never have for some reason. So now we are. Got really hot really fast out here, and my camera overheated. A couple bees hanging out in this squash plant here. So this is a white scallop squash. This is one that we use a lot in fresh cooking, and we do stuffed squashes with them. They end up looking similar to what this one is here, which is a golden pattison. And this one, they get much bigger than this, but we also stuff these ones. We do want to start preserving these because we end up getting kind of overwhelmed with them. As you can see, there's some more sitting over on that side of the plant, and another one coming out right there. This plant is extremely productive. So if you're interested in growing an awesome patty pan squash, the golden pattison is a really good one to grow. And over here we have a mashed potato squash, and this is a seriously cool squash. When you cook them, they turn into the consistency of mashed potatoes. So we trick the kids into eating squash, and they don't even know it. I'm terrible, I know. And then same thing as we have over in our other squash bed. This squash bed, we just kind of of lined them up. So we've got these two squashes the same, those two squashes are the same, and those two squashes are the same. Now, one of the biggest changes we made this season is last year we noticed that we never used this walkway right here. It just never got used. When we would walk around stuff, we would go use these other walkways in between the beds. We never used this walkway, and to me, that was a waste of space. So what I did this year is on all of these beds that are on this side of the garden, we planted melons and squashes and stuff right here. So as you can see, coming out of this bed, we have these plants that are overflowing. They're going to flow onto the ground. And then with this plant in particular, we can actually run it up this fence right here. And these are banana melons. So these get pretty big and I'm really excited for them, but I'll just kind of let them get out over here. Technically, this isn't the amount of space that they would need, but it's going to be enough space for them to grow and for us to get a few melons out of that. It didn't, however, work as well over here. So we have a honey nut squash that we planted in here with these beans, but it was kind of stunted from the transplant. I didn't like the transplant. So it's sitting under here. It's kind of getting shaded out by some of these beans here. We're going to see how it goes. It's starting to grow back a little bit. For a second there, it was looking like that and just kind of dying off, but that's growing out now, and it is a vining one. So that's going to come out here. Hopefully, we'll see. And then right here, we have another sugar baby watermelon like we have on the trellis over here. This was just an extra plant that we had, and we decided that it needed to be planted, and we had this space right here, and we purposely kind of scoot everything over in these beds so that way it kind of gives us some space, and we don't need to put them on the outside of the water lines. We can put it right here in the bed where it's getting watered by this drip tape right here. Let's talk about the watering real quick. So the watering starts over there. We have one line that goes down that side of the garden, and then one line that goes down this side of the garden, and we have drip tape that runs down every single bed. So we've got 4 rows of drip tape that goes down every single bed. It's all set on a timer. For the most part, I don't have to water anything in here by hand unless we're starting seeds. Then I'll kind of help them along, or when we first do transplants, I'll kind of help stuff along. But besides that, the watering takes care of itself. If it's not getting enough water, I can just add more time to it or do it more often. It's great. It saves a lot of time. This is a Clay County Yellow. This is another melon, and it's supposed to be a really, really nice sweet melon, and I'm excited for that one. And over here, this isn't a vining plant, but I did have this little spot to put it and decided to just throw this here because I already had this plant. And this is a zucchini, and we've got one little zucchini growing right here, and a bunch more are going to be coming soon. Zucchini is one that I have some plans with the freeze dryer for, and you'll see those plans later. Here we have a silver Yamato melon, and it's growing. It's starting to take off. It was kind of stunted when we first moved it over here, but it's starting to do better now. We're starting to get some nice big leaves and some nice vines forming down here. So this started getting shaded out, but it's kind of starting to reach out and get some sun now. We'll see how it goes. My hopes aren't high, but it's a zucchini plant and I can get plenty of those locally or from the other plant we have there behind us. This is what gave me the idea for this entire walkway that I have here. Is as I was planting my cabbage out, holy cow, look at this cabbage. It's just look at that thing. As I was planting my cabbage in here, I saw this plant, and this is a volunteer, and I honestly don't know what it is because I didn't grow anything like this over here last year. So it might have been something that I set down that I had harvested and just forgot about. I don't know exactly what put this here, but this was growing from right there on its own as a volunteer plant. And now this is starting to trail out and take over and pick up some speed now that it's out of the shade from the cabbages. That I'm really happy with that volunteer because that's what gave me the idea to do this entire walkway of different watermelons and different squashes like we have up there that are just gonna kind of take over this walkway. That's my main garden in the backyard. We did plant a bunch of fruit trees that if you're interested in, I will make a video about later. We also have another garden in the front where we're growing some other things, but this is our main garden where we grow most of our food. And in the past, I've done on another channel some more in-depth how-to videos on gardening and how I'm doing a lot of this. And if that's something you're interested in seeing on this channel, then depending on how this video performs and if anybody actually watches it, then that's something I can do later on this summer, especially as a lot more of this stuff starts to produce. I can kind of go over how to do a lot of this stuff. So if that's something you're interested in, then kind of help that along by watching this whole video, liking, subscribing, doing all those things that tells YouTube that you enjoyed this video.